Not all airports are created equal. Some are absolutely massive, but others are really small and hidden. Today, we're going to count down 15 of the smallest airport runways in the world. Starting with number 15, the Kagata Airport in Papua New Guinea, a rugged mountain airstrip cut from the jungle. Tucked deep into the remote highlands of Papua New Guinea, Kagata Airport is one of the least known but most extreme small runways in the world. Carved into a mountainside and surrounded by dense rainforest, Kagata's tiny slope runway is just 530 meters long, that's 1,730 feet. It's built on a narrow bridge that offers pilots no room for error. Its isolation, lack of infrastructure, and treacherous geography make every takeoff and landing here a true test of skills and nerves. There are no runway markings, no control tower, and no lighting. Everything relies on the pilot's visual instincts and experience. Only small rugged aircraft like the Pilatus P-6 Porter or the DHC-6 Twin Otter are even capable of landing here, and even then, only under clear weather conditions. For thousands of people living in this area, the airstrip is the only reliable connection to the outside world. Without it, a journey that could be flown in 20 minutes would require days of hiking through dense jungle. While landing here is not for the faint of heart, pilots have to navigate tight canyons and steep one-way approaches. The runway slopes uphill towards the village, which helps the aircraft slow down a bit more quickly, but also makes takeoff a hair-raising experience. There's no chance for a go-around here. Once you're committed to the landing, the pilot must stick it. A huge challenge here is the thick fog that often rolls in unannounced, and torrential downpours can turn the grassy runway into a slippery hazard. Flights are often delayed, rescheduled, or canceled altogether. Despite limitations, though, the airstrip is absolutely vital. Nonprofit aviation groups and mission-based airlines like Mission Aviation Fellowship, the MAF, are the primary operators here, flying in supplies, medical teams, and school materials. In return, they transport sick villagers to hospitals in larger towns like Wewak or Mount Hagen. This humanitarian lifeline is so important that locals often help maintain the strip themselves, clearing vegetation and smoothing the landing surface by hand. For those who make the journey here, it is both a thrill and a deeply humbling experience to witness how aviation can transform isolated communities. From a satellite perspective, it looks like a thin scratch across the emerald green jungle canopy, barely distinguishable from the surrounding forest. Its isolation and the contrast between man-made necessity and overwhelming nature make it one of the most visually fascinating and rarely seen runways on Earth. A reminder that aviation isn't just about convenience, it's about survival. Number 14. Courchevel Altiport in France, a runway in the French Alps with a built-in slope. The Courchevel Altiport, located in the French Alps, is one of the shortest and most extreme runways in the world, serving as a gateway for luxury travelers heading to the Courchevel ski resort. With a runway length of just 537 meters, that's 1,762 feet, and an incredible 18.5% slope, this Altiport landing is a challenge even for the most experienced pilots, requiring precision and expert navigation skills. Now, unlike conventional airport runways, which are typically flat, Courchevel's steeply sloped runway is designed to help aircraft decelerate more quickly upon landing. This means that planes must land uphill and take off downhill, making every arrival and departure a high-stakes maneuver. Now, one of the most dangerous aspects here is the lack of a go-around option. Pilots have to commit to landing on their first attempt. There's no room for second chances. The runway abruptly ends at the edge of a cliff, meaning that any miscalculation could lead to a catastrophic accident. Only specially certified pilots are even allowed to land at Courchevel, and aircraft types are strictly limited to small private planes, chartered flights, and helicopters. Many wealthy travelers prefer to fly in on private jets and helicopters rather than make the long, winding drive through the Alps. The Altiport is also used for emergency medical evacs, mountain rescue ops, and VIP charter flights from Geneva, Paris, and London. But in addition to its practical use, it is one of the most scenic airports in the world, offering passengers an amazing view of the snow-covered peaks of the French Alps. From a satellite perspective, the Altiport appears as a tiny airstrip carved into the mountainside, surrounded by snow-covered slopes and dense alpine forests. The high-altitude location here and precarious positioning make it one of the most challenging landing sites, easily distinguishable when viewed from above. Number 13. Barra Airport in Scotland, the only beach runway in the world used for commercial flights. Barra Airport, located in Scotland's Outer Hebrides, is one of the most unique and smallest commercial runways. Instead of traditional asphalt or a concrete surface, this airport's runway is a natural stretch of beach, making it the only airport in the world where scheduled commercial flights land directly on the sand. With a runway that's only 680 meters or 2,230 feet at its longest, pilots have to carefully time their landings with the tide, as the entire landing strip is submerged at high tide. Flights to Barra are operated by Logan Air, which runs daily connections to Glasgow using small Twin Otter aircraft. These lightweight planes are equipped to handle the soft, shifting surface of the beach runway, and the pilots who land here undergo special training to adapt to the ever-changing conditions. Since there are no traditional runway markings, pilots have to use wooden poles placed in the sand to align their approach, adding to the challenge of landing here. And one of the biggest difficulties is the unpredictability of the tides, the wind, and the sand conditions. If the tide rises too quickly, flights have to be delayed or rescheduled to ensure that the landing strip remains safe. Strong crosswinds from the Atlantic can also make final approaches extremely turbulent, requiring skilled handling from the pilots. But despite the challenges, it's a lifeline for the island's residents, providing an essential connection for medical emergencies, tourism, and cargo transport. For visitors landing on a pristine white sand beach surrounded by crystal clear waters, it's an unforgettable experience. From a satellite view, Barra Airport stands out as a short, shimmering stretch of sand on the western coast of the island, framed by rolling dunes and the deep blue waters of the Atlantic. The tide-dependent nature of the runway does make it one of the most visually dynamic airports visible from space, as the landing strip disappears and reappears with the rhythm of the ocean. Number 12. Wanaka Airstrip, a remote runway in the middle of the Indian Ocean. This is one of the smallest and most isolated airport runways on Earth. It's located on Wanaka Island, a tiny uninhabited island in the Mozambique Channel between Madagascar and the African mainland. This airstrip, at just 1,200 meters, that's 3,930 feet, serves as the island's only connection to the outside world. The runway is unpaved, made of compacted coral and sand, and is typically used for military, scientific, and emergency landings by the French armed forces. With no permanent population here, this airstrip is primarily maintained for strategic and ecological purposes, providing access to a region known for its biodiversity, turtle nesting grounds, and coral reef systems. There is no terminal, no navigation equipment, no refueling capability, and no air traffic control. Pilots have to be entirely self-sufficient and usually arrive on military transport planes or small charter aircraft. Landing here requires careful coordination with the French authorities, as well as favorable weather. Weather here poses a challenge for any operation on the island. The Mozambique Channel is prone to sudden squalls, cyclones, and intense humidity, all of which can make the approach and departure hazardous. Despite its obscurity, though, the airstrip plays an important role in environmental monitoring. The surrounding marine area has been designated as a protected ecological reserve. Scientists studying climate change, coral bleaching, and migratory bird patterns also use this runway to gain access to this otherwise unreachable island. From a satellite perspective, surrounded by turquoise waters and a ring of coral reefs, the island itself is small, only 4.8 square kilometers in area, and it looks like a speck of green and white in the middle of an endless ocean. The isolated nature of this airstrip and its fragile setting make it one of the most remote and least altered runways visible from space, a reminder of how air access extends even to the most forgotten corners of the Earth. Number 11. Gustaf III Airport in St. Bart's, the Caribbean's most challenging short runway. Gustaf III Airport, also known as St. Barthélemy Airport, is one of the smallest and most dangerous runways in the Caribbean, serving the luxurious island of St. Bart's, measuring just 650 meters or 2,130 feet in length. This tiny airstrip is sandwiched between a steep hillside and the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, making for one of the most adrenaline-inducing approaches in the world. Landing here requires precision. The runway is built at the base of a hill, and that forces pilots to execute a steep downward approach over the mountaintops before immediately leveling out and touching down within seconds. If a plane comes in too high, it risks overshooting into the ocean. If it comes in too low, it faces the risk of colliding with the hill. But the takeoffs are just as dramatic as the landings. Planes have to accelerate rapidly towards the end of the short runway before lifting off just feet above the water, making it a thrilling departure for passengers. This airport is crucial for St. Bart's. It serves as the main gateway for wealthy people, celebrities, and high-profile travelers arriving from nearby islands like Saint Martin and Guadeloupe. The airport also handles VIP private charters, ensuring that those who can afford the luxury of a quick island getaway don't have to rely on ferries. But despite its challenges, it's become one of the most famous aviation destinations in the world, attracting enthusiasts who come to watch landings from the nearby hills or the beach just beyond the runway's edge. The sight of a plane descending steeply over the road leading to the airport and landing mere feet from beachgoers is one of the most photographed aviation moments in the Caribbean. From above, the surrounding vibrant blue Caribbean waters and the lush green mountains create a dramatic contrast. The airport's precarious positioning and the steep landing approach make it an unmistakable sight from above, highlighting the extreme challenges pilots face when navigating this tiny yet vital airstrip. Number 10. Matekane Airstrip in Lesotho, a cliff-edge runway with no room for error. Matekane Airstrip. It's located in the mountains of Lesotho in southern Africa. It's one of the smallest and most extreme airstrips in the world, featuring a runway that quite literally stands at the edge of a cliff. Measuring just 400 meters or 1,312 feet in length, this airstrip is so short that many takeoffs involve planes dropping off the cliff before they gain enough speed to climb into the air, making it one of the most nerve-wracking aviation experiences anywhere. Pilots landing here have to ensure that their aircraft comes to a full stop within just a few hundred meters, as overshooting the runway would mean plunging off a 500-meter cliff into the valley below. The extreme altitude of 7,500 feet above sea level also adds to the difficulty, as the thinner air reduces engine power and requires longer takeoff distances, a challenge that this tiny runway simply doesn't provide. This airstrip was originally built to support the local communities here, providing a vital lifeline for delivering food, medical aid, and emergency assistance. It's not a commercial airport, and only small bush planes and stall as short takeoff and landing aircrafts like the Pilatus PC-12 and the Cessna Caravan can even land here. One of the biggest dangers is the unpredictable weather. There are strong crosswinds, fog, and sudden temperature drops, making landings and takeoffs pretty hazardous. Due to the high-altitude location, visibility can change here within minutes, forcing pilots to make quick decisions on whether to proceed or turn back. But despite the dangers, the airstrip has become a legendary one among bush pilots and extreme aviation enthusiasts, with many describing the takeoff experience as flying off the edge of the world. Well, there are no second chances here. Once a plane begins its takeoff roll, it either gains enough lift or plunges off the cliff, relying on momentum and skillful piloting to recover. From a satellite perspective, the airstrip appears as a barely visible strip of asphalt clinging to the mountaintop. The surrounding mountains and valleys create a stunning yet intimidating visual contrast. And unlike conventional airports that blend into their environments, this one stands out as a tiny yet critical lifeline in the vast remote landscape of Lesotho. Number 9. Agatti Airport, India, a narrow runway on a coral island. Located on Agatti Island in the Lakshadweep archipelago of India, it's one of the smallest and most remote airports in the world, serving as an air link to one of the most isolated chain of islands in the Arabian Sea. With a runway length of just 1,200 meters, that's about 4,200 feet, this tiny airport is built on a narrow strip of a coral atoll, with ocean waves crashing just meters away from both ends of the airstrip. This airport was built on land just wide enough to accommodate the runway, a small terminal building, and a few support structures. The rest of it is home to a fishing village and a handful of resorts, making the airport vital for the transportation of passengers, supplies, and medical emergencies. The airport handles daily flights using the ATR-72 turboprop aircraft. They're capable of operating on short runways in remote regions. One of the most challenging aspects, though, of flying in here is the lack of modern navigation systems. Combined with constantly shifting tropical weather like sudden rain squalls, pilots have to rely heavily on visual cues and manual flying skills during both approach and takeoff. And there's no possibility for an overrun. The narrow runway ends abruptly in the ocean, making a precision landing and quick braking critical. Still, this airport remains limited to short-haul domestic flights, primarily connecting Kochi International Airport in mainland India. Efforts have been made to expand it further to accommodate jet aircraft, but environmental concerns over the delicate ecosystem have slowed that development. Without air access, reaching this island would require long ferry rides over open ocean, often disrupted by rough weather. It also plays a crucial role in medical evacuations, which enables critically ill patients to be flown to better-equipped hospitals on the mainland. From a satellite perspective, it appears as a razor-thin runway running along the spine of this narrow island. Its location on the coral atoll gives it an almost floating appearance when viewed from space, making it one of the most picturesque airfields in the world. Well, despite its modest size, it's a shining example of how aviation enables access to even the most remote corners on Earth. Number 8. Svalbard Airport in Norway, the northernmost commercial airport on Earth. Svalbard Airport, located in Longyearbyen, Norway, is the northernmost commercial airport in the world, sitting at an extreme latitude of 78 degrees north. This remote airstrip serves as the primary gateway to the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard, a region known for its polar bears, glacial landscapes, and long, dark winters. With a runway measuring 2,483 meters, that's 8,146 feet in length, it is longer than many on this list, but what makes it one of the most extreme is its location, climate, and operational challenges. Unlike traditional airports, this one's built on permafrost, meaning the ground beneath the runway is constantly frozen. This presents significant engineering challenges, as melting permafrost during the summer months can cause the ground to shift, leading to cracks and instability in the surface. To prevent this, engineers constructed the airport on an artificial layer of gravel and ice, which must be meticulously maintained to ensure safe operations. Landing here requires pilots to navigate icy runways, strong crosswinds, and low visibility due to near-perpetual fog. And because of its remote location, emergency diversions are almost impossible, meaning that aircraft must arrive with extra fuel reserves in case of sudden weather deterioration. But despite all the challenges, it is a crucial link between mainland Norway and the Arctic, providing essential services for the region's scientific research stations, Arctic tourism, and local communities. And one of the most surreal aspects of landing here is the eerie beauty of this landscape. During winter, the runway's covered in ice and surrounded by snow-capped peaks, with the sun absent for months at a time. In the summer, however, the midnight sun casts a golden glow over the ice, creating a breathtakingly unique flying experience. And from a satellite perspective, it's a lone, linear strip carved into the icy wilderness. The position at the edge of the Arctic Ocean, with ice floes drifting nearby, makes it one of the most visually isolated airstrips visible from space, highlighting the harsh yet stunning nature of this remote frontier. Moving on to number 7. Qeqertarsuaq Heliport in Greenland, the tiny Arctic runway on a remote ice-covered island. Located on Disco Island, Greenland, it's one of the smallest and most isolated airstrips in the world, serving as the primary link between the remote Arctic settlement and the rest of Greenland. Unlike conventional airports with paved runways, this facility is officially classified as a heliport, with a short gravel airstrip that measures only 450 meters, that's only 1,476 feet in length. Despite its size, though, it remains crucial for local transportation, medical evacuations, and scientific research. One big challenge here is the harsh weather conditions. Situated along the western coast of Greenland, this area experiences extreme cold, heavy snowfall, and powerful winds year-round. The location near the Baffin Bay coastline means that thick fog, ice storms, and blizzards can suddenly appear, often making it impossible for helicopters or small planes to land. During the winter months, temperatures can drop well below -30 degrees Celsius, turning the runway into a frozen strip of compacted ice and snow. Because of its short runway length, it can only accommodate small aircraft and helicopters, primarily the Bell 212 helicopters and the Dash 8 turboprops operated by Air Greenland. These aircraft are used for passenger transport, medical evacs, and delivering essential supplies, as the town's remoteness makes a traditional road transport impossible. This place is home to one of Greenland's most important Arctic research stations, where scientists study glacier movements, climate change, and Arctic wildlife. This heliport serves as a vital hub for these researchers traveling between Greenland's ice sheet and the surrounding fjords. From a satellite perspective, it appears as a tiny clearing in the icy landscape. The contrast here between the dark, compacted runway surface and the vast Arctic wilderness makes it an easily identifiable feature when viewed from above. The isolation combined with the heliport's location highlight the logistics challenge of maintaining air travel in one of the most remote regions on the planet. Number 6. Heligoland Airport in Germany, a North Sea airstrip with barely enough room to land. Located on the tiny German island of Dünne in the North Sea, it's one of the smallest and most challenging runways in Europe. With its main runway measuring just 480 meters, that's just over 1,500 feet, this airport presents an extreme test of skill for pilots. This isolated and wind-swept airstrip offers a critical lifeline for both locals and tourists, but its layout and location makes it one of the most precarious landings in German aviation. The island of Dünne is a small sandy outpost separated from the main island, with no bridge or tunnel connecting the two. The only regular access here is by boat or air. It operates year-round, providing short-haul flights to mainland cities like Hamburg and Cuxhaven, and the airfield consists of 3 intersecting runways, none of which are particularly long. The main strip is just long enough to accommodate small turbopropped aircraft like the BN-2 Islander, which is the primary plane used here. Unlike more conventional runways surrounded by clear terrain, this airstrip is hemmed in by water on all sides with little room for error. Landings here require absolute precision, and takeoffs have to be perfectly timed, especially during strong gusts when even a slight miscalculation could lead to veering off into the sea. Adding to this airport's unique character is its proximity to a local seal population. It's not uncommon for gray seals and harbor seals to wander onto the runway, prompting temporary closures while the airport staff gently guide the animals away. Well, despite its limitations, it remains an economic and social artery. It attracts thousands of tourists here during the summer months, many of whom opt for the quick 30-minute flight over the more turbulent ferry journey. While plans to modernize or expand the airport have occasionally been floated, environmental protections and space constraints make any large-scale development unlikely. From a satellite perspective, it's a thin crisscross of runways that's laid across a sandy island, surrounded entirely by deep blue ocean. It gives the impression of a temporary strip placed on a sandbar, emphasizing just how extreme this landing site truly is. Its compact footprint and contrast with the sea make it a visually striking micro-airport that's visible from space. Number 5. Tufi Airport, Papua New Guinea, a jungle airstrip on the edge of a fjord. Tufi Airport, located in the Oro province of Papua New Guinea, is one of the most remote functioning airstrips in the Pacific region. With a runway measuring about 760 meters, that's just under 2,500 feet, Tufi offers a challenging landing experience for bush pilots, while also serving as the only fast and reliable link to one of the most isolated communities. The airport lies at the top of a steep peninsula overlooking the famous Tufi Fjords, which are often referred to as tropical fjords due to their dramatic, narrow inlets framed by towering jungles. Planes land directly on a grass and dirt strip, which is regularly maintained by the local villagers using hand tools and machetes to keep the vegetation at bay. Flights into Tufi are pretty infrequent, operated by Mission Aviation Fellowship or the MAF, and occasionally by Air Niugini on charter routes. The aircraft typically used here are light utility planes like the Cessna 208 Caravan, and they're prized for their ability to land on short, unpaved runways. Pilots who land here have to be comfortable with non-instrument approaches, as the airport has no control tower, radio guidance, or weather monitoring. Flight plans often change mid-air as rapidly forming tropical storms, winds, and mist rise from the fjords that can obscure visibility within minutes. And another major challenge is the condition of the runway itself, which is subject to erosion from heavy rains and can become waterlogged or soft during the monsoon season. There's no overrun area or buffer zone here, and a plane that fails to stop in time risks plunging into the steep slopes that lead down to the fjords. Beyond its utility, though, it's generally known as a gateway for ecotourism. The region has vibrant coral reefs, World War II shipwrecks, rare bird species, and a largely untouched cultural landscape, making it one of Papua New Guinea's most beautiful destinations. Most tourists arrive by air, making the airport a key enabler of economic opportunity in the area too. From a satellite perspective, it appears as a narrow green scar that's cut across the top of a thick jungle-covered ridge, bordered by the deep blue fjords on one side and mountains on the other. In a world increasingly defined by megacities and sprawling infrastructure, Tufi Airport is a reminder of the raw necessity and beauty of small, hand-built airstrips in remote corners of the planet. Number 4. Wanaka Airport in New Zealand, a tiny runway in the adventure capital of the world. Located on the South Island of New Zealand, Wanaka Airport is one of the smallest and most scenic airport runways, serving as the gateway to the alpine landscapes of Wanaka and Queenstown. With a runway length of just 1,200 meters or 3,930 feet, this small airport primarily accommodates small regional aircraft, private charters, and skydiving operations, making it a hub for adventure tourism. Pilots flying into Wanaka must navigate through a narrow mountain pass and rapidly changing weather conditions, often encountering strong crosswinds, sudden turbulence, and unpredictable cloud cover. The airport sits at an elevation of 348 meters above sea level, which does affect the aircraft performance. But one of the most unique features here is its premiere as a destination for skydiving and aviation tourism. The airport's home to some of the world's most scenic skydive spots, allowing thrill seekers to jump from 15,000 feet above the Southern Alps and Lake Wanaka. The airport's also the site of the Warbirds over Wanaka Air Show, one of the most famous aviation events in the Southern Hemisphere. This biennial event attracts aviation enthusiasts from around the world, showcasing historic fighter planes, aerobatic performances, and military aircraft demonstrations. The airport primarily caters to those small aircraft, but plans have been proposed to expand it to accommodate larger commercial flights. However, such plans have sparked some controversy among the locals, as many fear that increased tourism could disrupt the area's pristine beauty. For now, though, the airport remains a quiet, small-scale airstrip that caters to adventure travelers and private pilots. Despite the small size, the airport is a critical hub for emergency services, agricultural aviation, and for private air travel. The airport frequently facilitates search and rescue ops and medical evacs and conservation flights over New Zealand's national parks, making it an essential component of the region's infrastructure. From a satellite perspective, it's a tiny little airstrip. The proximity to the massive Lake Wanaka and the Southern Alps makes it one of the most visually spectacular locations in the world. Wanaka Airport blends in seamlessly to the landscape and reinforces the region's reputation as one of the most naturally beautiful places on the planet. Number 3. Gibraltar International Airport, the only runway that intersects a public road. Gibraltar International Airport is located at the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula. It's one of the smallest and most unusual international runways in the world, serving as the primary gateway to the British overseas territory of Gibraltar. With a runway length of just 1,600 meters or about 5,500 feet, this tiny airport presents unique challenges due to the limited space, high wind, and an active public road that crosses directly through the airstrip. Now, this runway intersects with Winston Churchill Avenue, the main road connecting Gibraltar to Spain. This means that every time a plane takes off or lands, the road is temporarily closed, with barriers coming down to halt cars and pedestrians, much like a railroad crossing. This rare design makes it one of the only airports in the world where vehicles and aircraft share the same space, making it a fascinating yet risky engineering feat. Pilots landing here must execute a highly skilled approach, often correcting their descent in the final moments before touchdown. The short runway means that aircraft have to brake immediately upon landing to avoid overshooting into the ocean. The airport is primarily served by British Airways, EasyJet, and Royal Air Maroc, with flights to and from London, Manchester, and Casablanca. It also serves as a military airbase, with Royal Air Force occasionally using it for operations, but despite its small size, it does play a crucial role in connecting Gibraltar's 34,000 residents to the rest of Europe. From a satellite perspective, the airport appears as a narrow strip of tarmac cutting through the urban landscape of Gibraltar. Its intersection with the major roadway makes it one of the most instantly recognizable airstrips, highlighting its extraordinary design and its operational challenges. Number 2. Juancho E. Yrausquin Airport in Sabah, the shortest commercial runway in the world. Located on the small Caribbean island of Sabah, it holds the distinction of having the shortest commercial runway in the world, measuring just 400 meters, that's 1,312 feet in length. This tiny strip of asphalt is nestled on a dramatic cliffside, surrounded by volcanic terrain. It's widely regarded as one of the most dangerous yet breathtaking landing strips on the planet, requiring highly skilled pilots to execute precise approaches and landings. Unlike major international airports which have long, wide runways that accommodate large commercial craft, this airport is exclusively used for small regional aircraft, private planes, and emergency flights. Larger jets cannot land here, and even small turboprop aircraft like the Twin Otter and Britten Norman Islander have to land with extreme caution. There is no margin for error. Both ends of the runway drop off into the Caribbean Sea, and a miscalculated landing could send aircraft over the edge. One challenge here is the constant crosswinds and turbulence generated by the mountainous terrain surrounding the airport. This approach requires a descent along the coastline, avoiding the steep cliffs while also preparing for an immediate stop upon touchdown. This short runway leaves no room for late braking or go-arounds, meaning pilots have to commit fully to their landing once they begin their final approach. Despite its size, though, it is a lifeline for Saba's residents and tourists, providing the only air connection to the outside world. Flights to and from the airport are primarily operated by Win Air, a small Caribbean airline that specializes in those short-haul regional routes. From a satellite perspective, it appears as a tiny sliver of asphalt jutting out from the island's rocky coastline, surrounded by deep blue ocean waters and steep cliffs. This dramatic contrast between the small runway and the vast natural landscape make it one of the most visually striking airstrips, clearly showing its challenging and extreme location when viewed from space. Number 1. Lukla Airport, Nepal, the gateway to Mount Everest and the world's most dangerous runway. Lukla Airport, officially known as Tenzing Hillary Airport, is one of the smallest and most dangerous airports, serving as the primary entry point for climbers and trekkers heading to Mount Everest. Located at an altitude of 2,860 meters, that's 9,300 feet, in the Himalayan mountains of Nepal, this tiny airport features a runway that's only 527 meters, or 1,729 feet long, with one end perched on the edge of a sheer cliff and the other surrounded by towering mountains. The runway has an extreme 12% gradient, meaning that the aircraft have to land uphill and take off downhill. The design is meant to help slow planes upon landing and assist with gaining speed during takeoff. However, this also means that there's no possibility of a go-around. Pilots only have one chance to land correctly, and overshooting the runway leads to a deadly drop into the valley. Only small aircraft like Twin Otters can operate at Lukla, as one runway is far too short for larger planes. The lack of modern air traffic control systems here and landing aids means that pilots have to rely on visual flying techniques, making landing an intensely manual and skill-dependent process. One of the biggest risks here is the rapidly changing weather, which can lead to sudden fog, strong winds, or complete whiteouts within minutes. This often results in delays or cancellations, as flying in these conditions is way too dangerous. Despite this, the airport remains a critical hub for adventurers and the local Sherpa communities, as it's the only fast way to access the Everest region without trekking for days through the Himalayan terrain. The airport also has a notorious history of accidents, making it one of the most feared runways among pilots and passengers. Despite improvements, though, in aviation safety, landing here is still considered one of the most nerve-wracking experiences in commercial aviation. However, for those who make it safely, the view upon landing, with the snow-capped Himalayan peaks towering on all sides of you, is an unforgettable reward. From a satellite view, it appears like a thin strip of asphalt carved into the mountain. The incline and abrupt ending and a cliff make it a visually striking airstrip, and that highlights the extreme conditions in which these pilots have to operate. The contrast between the dark, narrow runway and the snowy Himalayas surrounding it creates an amazing yet intimidating sight, reinforcing its reputation as one of the most extreme landing sites on the planet. Click to watch our next video on the most scary airport runways in the world. Thank you for watching Top 5s, and thank you to our channel members.